Open up. Where's the CUI? All right, folks, it's August, but in this episode, we're going to take a look at recapping the July town hall from the Cyber AB. It's been a while since we covered a town hall from our friends at the AB, so we decided to take some time and remind everybody that if you're not tuning into those, you really should, because especially if you're an assessor organization, if you're a consultant, RPO in that realm of the ecosystem, they're putting out a lot of information about updates to the marketplace, updates to training requirements, updates to maintaining training requirements, so on and so forth. But they also cover some of our favorite topics like rulemaking, speculation about the rules, upcoming DoD IG audit reports, Senate Armed Service Committee language in the NDAA, all kinds of cool stuff. And so that's what we're going to cover briefly today.
It's funny that we don't touch on a Cyber AB town hall on an episode for quite a while. And then we watch a Cyber AB town hall and it talks about things like rulemaking and the Senate Armed Services Committee. And now Jacob wants to talk about the AB town hall. All of a sudden, it's all interesting to him, right? Like
there's no escape. There's no escape. Yeah, we want to mix it up a little bit. You tune in, you're like, oh, hey, it's rulemaking. Because
I will say that it was interesting. I think that there were a lot of things that were provided to us with regards to obviously rulemaking, more dives into the rulemaking, more dives into the Senate Armed Services Committee, more dives into the IG report that everybody's asking about and everybody's waiting on pins and needles to read, right? So I do think that for us to decide to do an episode on this particular town hall, we chose a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as we know, everybody would prefer to get the information directly from DoD, but that's not happening for various reasons. And if you're not getting the information from us, then you should probably go talk to the AB, although you'll probably notice a distinct pattern in the question and answer section. Pretty much every question can only be answered by the DoD, so the AB just refers you over to them.
Now, have they done a good enough job eliminating all the AB directed questions? Like all those are done. So now we're just trying to sprinkle in those DoD questions to see maybe you'll slip up and answer them this time or something.
Yeah,
right?
It's like watching pro wrestling and trying to see when the kicks actually connect, right? When they slip up and say something they're not supposed to.
I don't think he really punched that guy.
Yeah. So anyways, let's just lead off at the top here. Everybody's favorite topic, CMMC rulemaking timeline.
Your favorite topic, but okay.
This is my favorite topic. So brief recap, CMMC is one program, but there are two rules that make up the program. The first rule is the 32 CFR CMMC program rule. This is the rule that was published right around Christmas of 2023 that outlines the structure and substance of the program, the levels, the waivers, the POAMs, roles and responsibilities, all that stuff. It writes down how the program works. The other part of CMMC is the 48 CFR CMMC rule. That's the part that contains the text of what goes into your contract clauses that directs you to get CMMC level 1, level 2, level 3, so on and so forth. With the two of those things together, you have a clause in your contract, your purchase order, smoke signals tied to the foot of a raven, whatever, and it says you need to get a certification in accordance with this CMMC level, and the 32 CFR program outlines what that means. So both of those things have to go through the rulemaking process before they're in black and white in the Code of Federal Regulations, the CFR. And so we are tracking the timeline for both of those things. So for the 48 CFR CMMC rule, the clause rule, if you will, it is currently going to be a proposed rule, which means it gets published. They take public comments. They go back and adjudicate those public comments, and then they publish a final rule, at which point the rule will then be effective. So there's still a little bit of time before the clause rule is effective. But the proposed rule itself was submitted for regulatory review up to OIRA, the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, a component of OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. They're responsible for reviewing all federal agency rulemaking actions prior to publication. So this proposed rule was sent to OIRA on 5/15/2024. So now getting to be a couple months ago. Generally, there will be 90 to 120 days of review when a rule is submitted, and that means that the anticipated window for publication of the 48 CFR CMMC proposed rule would be sometime mid-August to mid-September, at which point there would be 60 days for public comment, so on and so forth, and then we'll continue on down the path. On the other side, you have the 32 CFR CMMC rule. This is the program rule, as we refer to it. That was submitted to IRA at the end of June. So we had May for the 48 CFR rule. We had June 27th to be specific, for the 32 CFR rule. This is a final rule. We've already gone through the proposed rule public comment adjudication process. So we're at the end of the rulemaking cycle for this one. 90 to 120 days of regulatory review before publication means that the final rule would be published sometime around late September to late October. So there's a little bit of an overlap in September there for when we're looking at publication, but we're generally looking at early fall for when these rules would be published. On the slide presented in the AB Town Hall, they say that the target for publication in their estimation is November, which I don't really understand why they picked November. That's not what the math says.
I didn't get that either.
It could be November because, the 90 to 120 days is the rule for regulatory review, but it's not. It's more of a very strong suggestion because it's not like anybody gets slapped around if they miss that deadline. I don't think it's going to be November for publication. I think it will definitely be before that. Something to keep in mind, when final rules are published, there is a 60-day period before they go into effect. So the final 32 CFR rule gets published. There's a 60-day countdown, and then it is effective. At that point, it's over and done with. The reason that there's that 60-day countdown is this is what's known as a major rule, and all major rules get reviewed by Congress, essentially. GAO writes up a little report, which, as I found out, are really just one-page descriptions saying someone wrote a rule, it's a major rule, you have 60 days to review it. Thanks for participating, Congress.
Wait, so that's the congressional review of the rule, essentially. Is like, hey, just so you know, this rule's going out. That's
there
it.
Are thousands
no
of
details into what the rule is. It's just that this rule, the CMMC 48 CFR proposed rule.
Yeah, there are thousands of rules that get published every year, and I think one or two in history have ever gotten gummed up in this process. But nevertheless, there's still a formal built-in 60-day window from publication of a final rule till effective date of the final rule. So with all of that stuff together, the AB says we do not necessarily expect CMMC to enter into force officially until Q1 2025 at the earliest. I would agree with that, even though I don't think that the publication window will be November with 60 days, end of October. If you say, okay, let's go October 31st is when the 32 CFR rule is published. You add 60 days, that's December 30th, which means holidays, the election, the new administration, the new Congress, everything getting turned over. It's going to be Q1. It's going to be Q1.
But when did we see the proposed 32 CFR rule get released?
Well, the proposed rule, through the last year and that rule.
Merry Christmas.
Cycle,
Merry Christmas, right?
Well, yes. But what I'm saying is that if the rule is published before the end of the year, the effective date and the
okay. You're saying, because
people are, the effective date could be December 31st. No one's in the office, right?
Yep.
It's not like somebody is going to be on your doorstep on New Year's Day being like, open up, where's the CUI? Now,
I just want to make sure that we go on the record and say, Jacob, that last year when they dropped the rule at Christmas and then when they dropped other things at Thanksgiving, there was one red-bearded gentleman that was like, I hope that the holidays are happy next year too. And right now it's lining up to look like Christmas is going to be happy again, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you proud of yourself?
No, we'll never be free from the rulemaking treadmill. My holidays now happen in between Father's Day and 4th of July is my holiday season, because that's when the government's doing the least. The worst time to be in the business of tracking regulations and figuring out what's going on with this stuff is right at the end of the year in the holiday season, because that's when the government dumps all their stuff before they go on vacation. So
I mean, we want to make sure we celebrate dads and independence. So
yeah, I've basically written off the period of time from Thanksgiving until New Year's as you'll be lucky to be able to sleep at that time if you're in the business of reading rules.
Again, don't ever say that they don't listen to you.
Yeah, so that's what we think. I think that the publication will be slightly earlier than the AB thinks. I think that Q1 for effective date of the rules will be right in line with what the AB thinks. That's the current status for what's going on with the rulemaking. One last thing to keep in mind, because it's a final rule for 32 CFR and it's a proposed rule for 48 CFR, even if they both get published at the same time in August, September, October, maybe November, there's still a gap because the 32 CFR final rule will go into effect 60 days later. The 48 CFR proposed rule has to get comments, adjudication, and then be published again as a final rule. So there will be a gap of 3, 6, 9 months between the time that the program rule is effective and the time the clause rule is effective. And we've talked about this in previous episodes. We call this the market rollout versus the phased rollout. When your prime contractor customer will begin calling you, giving you ultimatums saying you're going to go get certified as soon as possible, right, will be very different than when DoD actually starts inserting the CMMC clause into contracts in accordance with the phased rollout. The thing to pay attention to is not the phased rollout. The thing to pay attention to is what your customers are going to ask you to do, and that will be driven by the 32 CFR rule, not necessarily the 48 CFR rule. So don't be fooled thinking this will be the back half of 2025. It's going to be Q1 of 2025 based off what we know right now.
Yeah, and we want to make sure that we don't slide into a level of comfort thinking, okay, well, we have until 48 CFR is finalized, because what we did see with 32 CFR is that it did move 55% faster than rules average. Average rules move, right? And then what we also know is that 48 CFR is less complicated, less in depth, less intricate, whatever word that you want to use to substitute in there. Therefore, there's a good possibility that it could move faster and it could be adjudicated quicker. And that this could move, a lot quicker in a pace. So don't just think automatically because one's final, one's proposed, and the one that was proposed last took about a year to get through the whole cycle and everything like that. Yeah. That's what you can anticipate here. Because I think if I were a betting man, and I'm not, and I'm not a betting man. I would think that, that they would be out to see if they could beat that over under of the 55% threshold for completion.
So the next part of the town hall was a part that is mildly annoying to me, I'll be honest. So language in the FY25 NDAA inserted by the Senate Armed Services Committee, our old friends, the SASC, who, as longtime listeners will remember, back in the FY20 NDAA, inserted language in Section 1648 that specifically created the CMMC program because they called for an assessment framework that would hold contractors accountable to implementing their cybersecurity requirements in DFARS. So now, several years later, here's the SASC asking questions in the FY25 NDAA about CMMC, and I don't think that the aides who were responsible for putting the questions together that they want answers to really understand who's in charge of what, why the requirements are the way they are, or sort of how big of a set of questions these are that necessarily aren't the problem of CMMC. So in the FY20 NDAA, and we're probably going to have a whole episode on this. I don't want to dwell on this for an hour, but very quickly, the FY20 NDAA has language in it that says that the Controller General, which is a GAO function, it's not the DoD controller, so I think that's a mistake on the AB slides, by the 1st of March 2025, needs to produce a study and report answering a few questions. How does the DoD intend for CMMC to adapt to changing threat environments with respect to AI, OT, and IoT? Let's just stop right here. Everybody stop. Take a deep breath. How does the DoD intend for CMMC to adapt to changing threat environments with respect to AI, artificial intelligence, OT, operational technology, and IoT, Internet of Things devices? I thought the entire reason why we revisited CMMC in 2021 and spent all that time going through additional rulemaking in 2022 and 2023, and all the hullabaloo and all the belly aching, and the previous GAO report that we already had on CMMC was to streamline and minimize the program. I thought it was to shrink the program down just to the minimum viable stuff that we actually care about, which is a perfectly good idea. AI, what are you talking about? How does CMMC deal with AI? What? Why is that? Why is this a question on the eve of the rules coming out? Like, that is not a thing. What are you talking about? Yes, Jason, yes.
Raise his hand. Maybe there's an enhanced level of CMMC, an enhanced level that, I don't know, pulls enhancements out of a guidance document that can be layered on top to the baseline. Remember that simplified baseline that we have? That could possibly, I don't know, counteract some of these things or help with the adoption or the improvement of systems. I think that, yeah, they're asking a question, but I think that the answer has to reside within Rev 3, within 172, right?
I think that it's a question that stems from people being distracted by what's going on in multiple different disciplines and domains of cybersecurity at a high level and conflating that with the main purpose of what CMMC is supposed to do. 800-171 is a data confidentiality standard. 800-172 is a much more robust security standard, but it's only going to apply to an infinitesimally small number of defense contractors. So you're going to ask the team, how does CMMC broadly deal with these specific things? You clearly didn't read what's going on with scoping and why these things are scoped out of the main model right now.
Yeah, I see the intent here, and the intent is, and it's a soapbox that I've kind of been standing on, is that, yeah, CMMC is great because it is implementing baseline cybersecurity hygiene in organizations that didn't have it at all. Unfortunately, that baseline cybersecurity hygiene that they are being injected with is 15 years old.
Hey,
it's 15 years. Excuse me. The threats that it would directly compete with were 15 years in the past.
Sure,
right?
but
and now we've advanced.
But as we've talked about at CS2, the overlap to real threats right now is extremely significant. So it's very disingenuous for the SASC to say, how does CMMC, a program that verifies requirements, deal with these things, rather than asking, hey, people in charge of writing the requirements, how are you going to deal with these things? This is a NIST problem. This is a CUI executive agent problem, right? This is not necessarily a CMMC problem.
I get it.
You know what I'm saying?
I get it. Yes, I get it.
Because
the whole validation versus baseline. Yeah, I get it.
The point of the FY20 NDAA language from this committee, for whom 75% of the members are still on the committee, was to verify an existing set of requirements. And now they're saying, 4 years later, after there was a lot of drama about the program being too big and cumbersome, how are you going to go off and deal with these 3 other distinct domains of cybersecurity? And you're like, guys, what was the goal here, right? What was the goal? So is it an interesting question? Yes, but I feel like they just came up with it, right? Anyways, let's look at the rest of the questions and sort of...
Yeah, this definitely needs a whole episode, right?
It definitely does. So what are DoD's plans for standardizing the identification and marking of CUI, and how will that impact CMMC certification? Again, the DoD CIO is not directly responsible for the CUI program of the Department of Defense, right? That is a different office inside the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense. And as DoD has said before at many events, that is after, like, CMMC comes way after CUI discussions with your customers, right? The assumption is that you've already figured all that out. That is not a CMMC verification problem, right? You talking to your customer, figuring out what's going on, scoping your environment, implementing your controls with 800-171 and beyond are all problems that exist prior to CMMC showing up to verify you. Again, you are conflating what the CMMC program is doing with an office that isn't in charge of CMMC, an office that isn't in charge of CUI marking, and the purpose of the program that you, the SASC, directed DoD to create 4 years ago. Like, why are you asking about this? You should be asking about this. Let me be very clear. I have no idea why now, 13 months later, after the DoD IG report, that completely blew the doors off the fact that DoD is systemically undermarking CUI. And a lot of that falls on the plate of the DoD CIO's mismanagement of the technology environment within DoD components, not giving them the tools they need to properly market. There's no language about that specifically. Instead, it just gets shoveled over here, and it's the CMMC PMO's problem to answer the question in some GAO report. Like, that should be a separate question in the FY25 NDAA. You should be going to OSD INS and knocking their door down and being like, what the hell's going on in this IG report? Why have you completely mismanaged this program? I don't think that this is the appropriate place for that question, because you're conflating programs. It's not a CMMC problem, right? CMMC, as we've said before, exposes this problem, but it isn't the fault of CMMC.
You need a breath? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Anyways, they have other questions in here.
And I think that we're just going to get steamed up even more the more we go down the line. So let's just keep going.
How does DoD intend to assist subs, including small businesses, with CMMC? It's going to be the same script that we've heard for years.
A pat on the back.
There's free tools and resources that have limited value in meeting the actual requirements that you need to comply with, right?
Absolutely.
There's lots of great tools and services that have varying amounts of value depending on what you would like. But in terms of actually facilitating your requirements that they came up with, very minimal value at actually directly dealing with those requirements. They're going to tell you that costs for implementing, maintaining, and certifying are allowable costs, which we've heard for years, which isn't necessarily untrue from their perspective. And the part that people forget about, changing the entire CMMC program to 2.0, where we impact fewer companies. We allow self-certification at level 1. We allow POAMs. We allow waivers. We have a big phased rollout. We're affecting fewer companies. Those are all concessions to industry. The COTS carve out that says if you deal with COTS information, you just straight up don't have to protect it, even if you deal with CUI. Those are all concessions to industry. And then finally, just hoping that the primes are going to take care of their subs, as we heard from DoD at CS2 DC back in 2022. Most of the ecosystem that has to deal with these requirements doesn't work for DoD. They work for the primes. So how are the primes going to help for it? I hope they have a plan, because that's not necessarily DoD's direct problem. That's going to be the answer. It's always been the answer. You don't need to have a new GAO report to find out the answer. It's been the same answer for 4 years.
Not trying to be Elmer Fuddie here, okay? But if you were a subcontractor for a prime, right, and your prime, and we've talked about this on previous episodes, necessarily isn't taking a interest in your CMMC progress, do you think that it would be, it would behoove you to reach out to them and say, hey, can you help me? Do you think that that's probably a logical thing? Or do you think they're concerned about your progress, or they're going to replace you? You know what
based
I'm saying?
Off of what we've seen in terms of talking with a significant percentage of the DIB over the years, and based off of what we hear from companies every day, every week over the last 6 to 9 months, increasingly in the last 6 to 9 weeks, if you have not heard from your prime regarding what their plan for you is with CMMC, you need to call somebody immediately, because that means that they're not throwing you a lifeline. That means that they don't think that you are a high enough priority for them to do it for you or with you, right? And so you're going to be in a very precarious position if in Q1 of 2025, they call you and they say, hey, you're getting CMMC certified, right? And you say, yeah, I'm waiting for you to help me do it. And they go, ooh, let us know when you get that cert, click, because that's happening to people right now regarding their SPRS scores. That's happening right now with people's responses to questionnaires about their plans for getting CMMC certification. If your score is too low, if your answer for when you plan to get the certification is too far away, some very uncomfortable questions are starting to get asked about contractors, up until the point you can check out our episode with Daniel Akridge from a couple weeks ago, where they're cutting off the spigot of work right now, like before CMMC is even a thing.
Yep.
Yeah. If you haven't heard from your prime regarding CMMC, you need to reach out to them immediately.
So when they group together in bidding teams, right, Jacob, you would think that this is some of the stuff that they vet out. And when they say that you are the weakest link, they're not necessarily, hey, let's nudge you along. Maybe behind the scenes, they're looking to replace you, right?
Listen, this is what I've heard from talking to representatives from the primes prior to being on panels with them, facilitating panels with them, putting on industry events to try to put out information from the primes. If you haven't heard from them, you need to reach out, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line, period.
Case in point.
Okay. Moving on to the rest of the questions before we take this already is the episode on the SASC thing. Okay. What are CMMC Red Teaming requirements for a company to maintain certification? Do you need a GAO report to answer this question? Do you need to task the Controller General to have a report to answer this question? Can't you just call the people that you have regular hearings with about this topic? You haven't had
send an email?
Why is this a GAO report requirement? What are the red teaming requirements? For most companies, there aren't any. And there aren't any because pen testing red teaming requirements aren't part of the NIST 853 moderate baseline. Some companies at CMMC level 3 will have requirements like this. But again, a very, very tiny amount of defense contractors are going to have that requirement. And I thought the whole point of spending all this time rulemaking and changing the program was to keep costs down. I thought the whole point was to streamline what's going on. Why are we talking about adding red teaming and pen testing to the requirement for contractors? Why are we asking about what they're going to do about AI for 800-171? The vast majority of companies will be dealing with those requirements, not with 800-172 and other advanced standards. Do you need a GAO report to answer speculative questions like this? Do you need a GAO report to get answers about DoD's plans for dramatically expanding the scope of the program when everyone was super hot about making sure that they minimize the scope of the program? What are we doing?
It's just all four of these are the hot button topics with regards to cybersecurity, in the DIB. Just look at the first, I guess, question they tend to answer. How does the DoD intend for CMMC to adapt to changing threat environments with, instead of respects of AI, OT, and IoT, you can put buzzword, buzzword, buzzword. Hot topic, buzzword, hot topic, buzzword, hot topic.
Zero
buzzword,
trust.
Right?
How does it have you guys forgot zero trust.
That's what we're one question short. Yeah. What is the CMMC position on zero trust architecture and how do you intend to implement that? Right.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much where we're at. But one thing that we've learned in the time of doing this show is that GAO reports happen. They just happen. Oh, yeah. They're just organically. So if you're doing a report, obviously, like sometimes like you have to conjure up questions as to what we're going to answer in this report. And usually those questions have to do with what public outcry is coming from, right? So somebody has a concern about AI and its impact on critical infrastructure in the DIB because the DIB is critical infrastructure. Somebody, obviously, we've read the impacts of CUI overmarking, the impacts of cost.
Yeah.
And the red teaming one, I think that's the one that's kind of like the left field. Like Who's just sitting around like, what CMMC, an effing red team, bro?
It's just one of these things where it's like, I know they got a lot going on. I know you guys are really busy. I know your aides have to figure this out. But
have you ever heard of a red team?
But this is the SASC asking these questions. And 4 years ago, it was the SASC that created the program. So why is the SASC asking questions that are this far off base? This was your idea. Okay. Anyways, let's move on to recap the rest of the town hall. I'm excited to see what GAO comes up with because I don't know what the answers are going to be here. I really think that there could have been more productive questions that they could have asked around CMC or directed reports for these questions to go to the appropriate sections of the DoD rather than just lumping it in as a CMMC problem.
And so what they did was they went from one report and then they started talking about another report, Jacob. They said that the DoD's IG report on the AB accreditation process, which is basically more anticipated than, I don't even know, the released 871 revision 3.
This got all the attention. This got all the attention several months ago whenever the news broke because people who had never paid attention to DoD IG reports before in the past said, oh, man.
They found an IG report?
There's going to be an IG audit of the... to determine whether the DoD's process for accrediting third-party organizations to perform CMMC 2.0 assessments is adequate to ensure that organizations meet all DoD accreditation requirements. People were like, ooh, there's something unsurly going on. There's something sketchy going on. There wouldn't be an audit unless something bad happened, right?
Checks
there
and
must have been
balances,
some sort of rule. Nope. That was the straw that got drawn out of the hat. Or I don't know. Do you draw straws out of a hat? I don't know how straws work. That was the number that came up. in the hundreds of DoD IG report announcements that get announced every year, it was just yet another CMMC coincidence at the peak of rulemaking that this news broke. And apparently, according to the AB, that report is now finished up and they're going through the final checks and signatures. And so I anticipate that it will be published here September, probably right around the time that we're expecting rules.
News release publishing or something like that. That's one of the things that we were told to anticipate.
I'm sure. And I'm absolutely sure that the industry group, industry publication coverage of this report will find the most out of context, negative sounding part of the report, and that will be the headline. So please tune into the podcast, give it a like, please subscribe, follow us on LinkedIn for the people who actually read the reports and can tell you what the actual summary is, rather than these ridiculous headlines that keep popping up. It just drives me nuts. But yeah, we're expecting that and I don't know, maybe they did find a bunch of smoking guns. Maybe they did find a bunch of malfeasance going on in the accreditation process. I don't think so. Matt Travis didn't sound very worried.
I don't think that if that was the case and they know the results of the report, that they're going to be on the town hall, wait for that report to come out. I can't wait for you to read this one. And then so there was that. They talked about the IG report. It's coming. We should see it soon. And something else that's coming soon, Jacob. The draft cap, the 2.0 version of the draft cap. Now, we talked about this the first time that it came out. And it's actually 2 years old now. The first cap is 2 years old. And
like Matt Travis said, a lot of the changes to the draft cap are in response to the public comments that the AB asked for. So that was great news. That was very encouraging to hear.
Yeah, you crowdsourced input to improve the document, to make it better, which is absolutely great. And now we're waiting. And I know a Polynesian gentleman that sits on the podcast with a guy with a beard, and he had said that, they're not going to announce anything until there's start finalization of rules. They're not going to release a draft cap until they know what's in the rule. And this has always been my stance. We're not going to create a document off of something that's not finalized yet. So we're not going to throw a final document out there that's going to possibly be changed by the overarching document that controls this whole thing. And so that's just basically what the test is. Now, God willing, it's better than the last one.
I think it probably will be.
Yeah, I do too. I think that there's a lot of 2 years. I've had 2 years. I just hope it doesn't come out 2 years and this is it. NCAA football 25. Wait, this is just
whatever it is, that's going to be the one that we're stuck with for a while. I think it will be better. But yeah, everyone, manage your expectations depending on exactly what it looks like. But they are going through the comments that they received. They are taking their time. They have a working group that's working on it. It's going to be different and most likely better than the first one. And it's coming, which is encouraging.
That's all that's important. Now, before we get out of here, Jacob, is there anything else from the town hall that you feel like, really stood out to you?
Yeah. So a couple things. If you haven't tuned into the town hall recently, you should, especially if you're on the assessor, RPRPO, you're trying to get your certification as an assessor, you're trying to maintain those things. If you're in the international audience, you're curious about what's going on internationally, you should definitely give the town hall a listen. They talk about terminology clarifications. They talk about training, maintaining certification changes to what they're calling Marketplace 3.0 in terms of your visibility in being searched for in the CMMC Marketplace. They had some speculation about international participation based off of language in the rule. Apparently, they're planning to have the folks from the Canadian CMMC set up on the AB Town Hall September, October. So that should be pretty awesome. And so there's a bunch of good information in the town hall. It's pretty information dense these days. Everyone should tune in. We'll link down below like we always do when we cover these things. And that's the AB Town Hall. Friendly reminder, things are happening. So be sure to tune into the AB Town Hall because it's a good source of information.
And be sure to tune in to us because it's an even better source. Yeah. We'll see you next week, guys.
See ya.
Were you one of the campers who did not make it to Secure the Dib Summer Camp 2024? That's okay. We still have the sessions available for on-demand. You can register at securethedib.us and get the slides, recordings, access to everything you need. You can also reach out to our team and then fill out the CMMC Pathfinder tool as well. So if you need access to those recordings, just register at securethedib.us. You can also find it on the Summit 7 website, and we appreciate you stopping by.